This episode of EMS One-Stop is brought to you by Lexipol, the experts in policy, training, wellness support and grants assistance for first responders and government leaders. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's Lexipol.com. Hello and welcome to another edition of EMS One-Stop. I'm your host, Rob Lawrence, and we've been away for a little while because, quite honestly, we've all been on the road. We've been traveling. We've been hitting conferences. Some of our guests in the room have been at very official governmental briefings, but we're back, and we're back with a vengeance, and we're back in force. And my guest needs no introduction, but welcome, Matt Zavadsky. And you've been on the road too.
Rob, we've passed each other in lobbies and literally in an airport. You and I ran into each other at the DFW International Airport, and you were kind enough to try and get me on your flight because my flight got a little bit jacked up. So it's amazing how our paths have literally crisscrossed across the country.
Well, you also saw my most embarrassing moment where I didn't note the gate change. I didn't note the terminal change. And ladies and gentlemen, I said to Matt, come and try and get on my flight because we're both going to Greensboro, North Carolina. And I walked Matt to what I thought was my gate, which was in fact the flight to where, Matt?
Mexico City.
So whilst we could have been coming to you live from Mexico City, Matt, as in the way that only Matt can, pointed out that I need to check my gate. And he was right. I was not only at the wrong gate, I was in the wrong terminal. But luckily, thanks to the Dallas-Fort Worth Metro train, I was round there and on my flight in no time at all. So I'm sure there's already some takeaways from this podcast about checking your information, making sure it's up to date, and keeping up with the flow. And don't do that in front of Zavadsky, because I'm sure he'll make some smart Facebook comment as time goes by. And
I did not.
You did not, actually. Anyway, I also saw a note on a Facebook page about people don't like a lot of preamble in their podcasts and vodcasts. So let's cut to the chase.
Okay, let's do it.
So we've spoken about this before, but ET3 treatment in place, obviously and we could talk about sort of what's coming up in terms of the legislative approach to that. But we had spoken a long time ago. We'd heralded the arrival of ET3. I did a little meme with ET and something to phone home about, and we were looking forward to it. Didn't go the way we planned. So in case you haven't been doing EMS for the last 3 years, Matt, just give us the kind of backstory to where we are today.
ET3 was terminated. It was terminated early by CMMI, ostensibly and as published by them, because it was not going to be able to show an overall cost savings. What they did share in all transparency was that they invested a ton of money in oversight analysis, and with that level of investment of personnel and contracts, the low number of enrollments into the ET3 model, i.e. the low number of claims, at the pace that they were going, they were never going to be able to show an overall cost savings. However, there was significant cost savings on a per intervention basis, and we've been trying to get that information from CMS for a year.
So we asked, we possibly FOIA'd. I'm not sure we lawyered up, but we didn't lawyer. We didn't lawyer up, but we were close. But they actually came clean and said what?
They did release the data. Several of us were on the quality management committee for CMS for the ET3 model, and we had been privy to data from Booz Allen, who was the outside evaluator for the ET3 model. We were given information about what the net savings to Medicare was per ET3 intervention, but we were sworn to secrecy. And like you, Rob, I don't look good in orange, and didn't want to be on Medicare's blacklist. So many of us could not share the data that we knew because we were sworn to secrecy under a QA process. We and members of Congress asked Medicare to release that data to serve as the basis for the Congressional Budget Office, better known as the CBO, to be able to do a CBO score on the savings to the Medicare program for a treatment in place legislative initiative. CMS declined our first request, saying that it's QA, we're not going to release it. We then sent members of Congress, the chair of the House Ways and Means Committee, sent letters to CMS. No, we really want this data. CMS said, nope, we're not going to release it. We don't have to. We then FOIA'd, Freedom of Information Act requested, and the EMT did, for the data. CMS initially replied that they don't have to release it. It was part of a QA process. And oh, by the way, our request was overly broad. We then refined NAEMT's FOIA request with much more specificity and the indication that QA is protected when it's patient specific or provider specific. This does not fit the QA model. And if you need more specificity, what we really want are slides 10 and slide 14 from the CMS ET3 Quality Committee review on March 18th, whatever it was, 2023, to be very specific. And then to Medicare's credit, CMS's credit, they actually did release that data to us, to NAEMT last week. Very, very exciting news, because now we can officially say that the net savings to Medicare after they pay EMS, after they pay the tertiary provider, telemedicine, whatever it is still $550 to $570 per enrolled ET3 participant. And when you do the math, that's $1 billion or more of savings to the Medicare program, which now CBO can use to evaluate the benefit economically of doing a no transport, treatment in place model. So it's big news.
That's excellent. And we've just been looking at that on the screen as you've been talking, Matt. And interestingly, I mean, it's great that they've produced this, because as I always say, if they come in and do an audit on you, they will take a sample of 30 or 40 or 50 calls, work out where the deficit is, and then extrapolate that, average it across your entire call volume, and send you the bill. That's how they treat us. And so it's good that we've actually sort of kind of managed to turn the tables to say this is from the data that's been submitted, actually the number. Now we've got that. And of course we had ET3, ET3's come, ET3's gone. What are we going to do with this new information we have, and how can we apply it to the good and benefit of actually getting us paid for doing what we do?
Thanks to great collaboration between NAEMT, the American Ambulance Association, the International Association of Fire Chiefs, and the International Association of Firefighters, we have worked together to get 2 bills introduced into the legislature that reimburses EMS for treatment, non-transported treatment in place. One of the main hurdles in getting any bill passed that requires Medicare payment change is a Congressional Budget Office score. The House Ways and Means Committee, as we talked about in one of our last podcasts, and thank you for getting my last name correctly, Rob, because that brings back little, bad memories about that, or funny memories about the hearing, was House Ways and Means and Energy and Commerce, which are the 2 committees of jurisdiction, are all about this. They want to do it, but they needed the data to be able to get a good Congressional Budget Office score for this particular piece of legislation. Now that we have the data, they can use that, and this legislation can move, both legislations can move forward, because they show, yes, it is in fact a savings to the Medicare program, and it's not going to be a cost to the government for implementing a new payment model for EMS that we've advocated for decades.
So what do you feel about timing, though? Of course, we're in an election year. We potentially could be in a lame duck period. Does that mean nothing's going to happen until January? Then we've got to brief new members, etc., become enamored to them. So we have the information. When's the action going to follow?
Yeah, that is the $1.6 billion question, Rob. And Congress is what Congress does. But the good news is that with strong support from the 2 committees having jurisdiction, there is a good likelihood that this will move relatively, everything's relative in Congress,
Yep,
will move relatively quickly. We continue to get co-sponsors of the 2 bills. Either one of them would be fine for this process. It's the Kerry bill and the Welch bill. Bipartisan support. So it's really important that the people that are monitoring and seeing this podcast get on NAEMT's website, get on AAA's website, go to the online legislative service, and ask your local elected officials to become co-sponsors of this bill and get it through. Huge infusion of economic resources to the EMS community, at the same time saving the government millions and hundreds of millions of dollars, if not more, in Medicare expenses for unnecessary ER visits.
That's fantastic. And if you want to go into the back catalogue of the EMS One-Stop, you will in fact catch us talking to Matt about the congressional hearing that he gave with Dr. Ed Rock. And names aside, of course, that I hope laid the groundwork in the level of understanding to these folk as to what we do, our plight, the parlous level of income we get to do business, etc. So again, thank you for doing that. I commend that you all just go back a couple of editions of this particular podcast and have a look at that.
And Rob, just to highlight before you go to the next topic, to
Yeah,
highlight the level of interest during EMS on Hill Day, which you were at and we were at, many were
yeah.
at, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee requested a 30-minute get together with the leaders of the industry to continue talking through and to come up with how do we get this through?
Mm.
How do we get this through? How do we get the data? And again, having that level of interest where it's not just meeting with a legislative director from an individual member of Congress, it was face to face with the actual chair and his staff. That shows the level of interest that we really need to be able to capitalize on and are
Good.
capitalizing on.
And actually, I hope during that meeting, thinking back to your hearing, your Ways and Means hearing, of course, a lot of questions were asked about if I go and see Secretary Becerra tomorrow, what would you have me ask him and what would you have me do? So I hope, and I know they followed through with this, but
It
I
did.
hope you kept that pressure up.
Yeah, we absolutely did.
Yeah.
And we gave them very practical tools. And quite frankly, they're ready to go. So just amassing enough co-sponsors, which the listeners to this podcast can help with by going in and doing that letter to your local elected officials saying, hey, this bill makes a ton of sense. It helps us as an EMS agency continue providing service, but it's also more than paid for in the federal government by the savings to the Medicare program.
Excellent. So whether you're watching this as a podcast or you're listening to this as an Apple podcast, of course, all of those links will be in the show notes. If not, they're already on the screen if you're watching. So make sure you do that because right now we need all the support we can get. We need everybody to lean in to help us get to where we need to go. And of course, that fantastic, grand reveal from CMS in their data is absolutely essential. So let's just take a second and have a word from our sponsor.
Lexipol empowers first responders and public servants to best meet the needs of their residents safely and responsibly. Serving more than 2 million public safety and government professionals in over 8,000 agencies and municipalities, Lexipol offers a range of solutions that includes policies, training, behavioral health resources, news and analysis, and grant assistance services for law enforcement, fire and rescue, EMS, local government, and other agencies dedicated to public safety. To learn more, visit lexipol.com. That's LEXIPOL.com.
Thank you. The amazing voice of Jim Dudley there, of course, who is the presenter of Policing Matters over on Police One. He is my designated voiceover artist for this show. Make sure that you listen to Jim, of course. So there is a lot, whilst it's a police-centric podcast, there's a lot of crossover and a lot of real-time discussion that's going on there with some pretty cool and senior police FBI officers and representatives. Back here with Matt Zavadsky. Before I go back to Matt, of course, don't forget, if you're listening to us on the platform that you take in your podcast from, make sure you like and subscribe. And of course, if you're watching us, we're over on the EMS One YouTube channel. And so you can see our faces. And of course, as I always say, we add in graphics, charts, graphs, etc., to help us along. So you just don't have to look at our smiling faces the whole time. So wherever you take Thank you, Matt. So wherever you take, for those listening, Matt just made a funny face. So wherever you take your podcast or vodcast from, please make sure you like and subscribe. And of course, as you know, every time an episode of EMS One-Stop comes along, you get notified. Into part two, Matt, I've got to really pick off the elephant in the room here. And we've seen from the press release, two things have happened. One, obviously, the situation in Fort Worth. And two, you're moving on to a new job. So I'm going to take those in order. We've seen what's been going on in Fort Worth. Obviously, you're still a part as we go to air with MedStar. But, what can you brief us on?
So this has been a very interesting process, Rob. Like many EMS systems across the country, and you do an amazing job collecting the local and national news stories from around the country, and we put them on the AIM High webpage and the AAA webpage, and we share it with the community. MedStar was struggling no different than anyone else with economics, costs skyrocketing, reimbursement stagnant, and in order to maintain providing the level of service that the community wanted, and we're a governmental entity, so we have a little bit of a different relationship, but we were not able to fulfill those expectations with the revenue that we were generating from user fees. We have not received a subsidy for a decade and a half. Last time we got a subsidy was in 2009. And we were able to survive without needing a subsidy and provide the level of service. We had been briefing our board, which has representation from all the member cities, including Fort Worth, that, hey, we're deficit spending. We're dipping into our reserves to continue operating service, and that is not a long-term good strategy. So we're probably going to need public funding. We're definitely going to need public funding if you want to maintain the same service level that you've been getting. And there are a number of ways to do that. You can change the service level, like some places like Medic and Charlotte have done, and some other communities, to right-size the cost of the system. Or you can keep the same system and just we need some additional funding. The city engaged a consultant, Fitch and Associates, to kind of kick the tires. And we supported that process and said, okay, just make sure that we're being transparent and that the numbers are correct. And the Fitch and Associates team, as part of the scope of work, gave the city of Fort Worth about 4 different options of what they could do with their system. They could essentially keep the current system for $3.5 million, which is pretty much what we had said we were going to need to maintain that service level. Or they could transition it into a fire-based model for anywhere from $10 or $12 million all the way up to $60 million, depending on capital, et cetera, et cetera. So Fitch and Associates were not making a recommendation. They just essentially gave options. And the subcommittee of the Fort Worth City Council decided that the best option going forward for the system was to merge it into the fire department, make the field providers and some support staff civil service and or sworn, still being discussed, and make the service delivery part of the fire department. So that was a pretty clear indication to many of us that, gosh, we might want to start looking for other opportunities. For many of MedStar's leaders who have been innovators in the system in the country for a long time, it has opened some doors for them. And one of the doors that was opened for me was with a group of folks who I love and have admired my entire career. And they were very gracious in their opportunity for me to go work with Page Wolfberg and Worth Advisory Group, and could not turn down the opportunity. It is a phenomenal organization and a great group of people. So I am leaving MedStar, and as I think everybody knows, going to become affiliated with Page Wolfberg and Worth Advisory Group, hopefully doing the things that we've done in Fort Worth with the MedStar system for the last 2 decades, and being able to do that now on a more national level and help agencies achieve that same level of performance.
So last thing first then. So I personally am delighted you will continue to be you, fighting the good fight, continuing the good work, and staying on the national stage. And I think everyone that's listening will be relieved and delighted to hear that. However, we've seen, and again, you mentioned the news tracker, and I've put a link up on the screen for those that are watching, and of course, links in the show notes, emsintel.org, publicly facing, publicly available, searchable information about our EMS industry and some of the conditions and situations we find ourselves in. Of course, funding being one of the major categories. And of course, this is not just happening to MedStar in Fort Worth. It's happening, as we can see, in various degrees around the country. But I've got to ask the staffing question. You'd mentioned that they're going to join the fire department in the city of Fort Worth. We've seen other places where, quote unquote, our medics become second-class citizens. And I would hope that as part of the handover, that's a major consideration for the good folk on the ground working on the truck right now.
Yeah, and Rob, when we knew that this transition was going to happen, that the city council majority voting to move it to the fire department, again, purely their decision, that's fine.
Yep.
We switched our approach, if you will, to really focusing on the team members who were going to transition to a new environment, new culture, new delivery model, and really a new organization. And having seen, not experienced firsthand, thankfully, but having seen and heard and witnessed the difficult transition from one type of provider into the fire service, we have been strong advocates, Ken Simpson, our CEO, myself, others, that if these employees who are currently government employees under another governmental entity are going to become city employees in the fire service, they need to be on the same level, for lack of a better term, as the folks they're going to be working side by side with. So not necessarily making them just civilian providers within the fire department, but certainly civil service, and by all means, if possible, sworn. Because as you and I and everybody else know, when you're a sworn public servant, especially under a police or a fire department model, you get benefits that civilians don't. Public safety officer benefit, pension benefits, your survivors get pension benefits. So we want to advocate for our employees to say, hey, if they're going to be working for the fire department, they need to get the same benefit as the person standing beside them on the car crash. So when they both get hit by a car, their families are treated the same, not having the single role EMS providers treated in a lesser extent, because they're not a lesser extent. They are as crucial as any other provider in that department.
Well, thank you for saying that, and obviously thank you for looking after your people, and also thank you really for having this conversation with me. I think that you've given some answers to questions that many people I've spoken to in the last few days have asked me, and so I'm really asking for a lot of folk out there. So obviously, thank you for being candid with me and us, Matt. It's really appreciated.
And Rob, we've really tried to be good partners through this process. We've been very supportive with the city and all the member cities that are part of it, but we understand that there are forces occurring that we might not have a lot of control over. And if the majority of the people who are making the decision feel this is the best for their community and for their taxpayers, okay, how can we help? We're not going to, nobody benefits from a knockdown, drag out fight. But as you indicated, there are now people in the community and people across the country that are saying, why? And what does this mean? We don't have all those answers, but again, it's a decision from the folks who are elected to represent the community. And if that's what they want to do, that's great. Our role is to try and do as much as we can to maintain a transition into a new provider system that keeps those core tenets, the high performance, high value, mobile integrated healthcare, flexible deployment, all those things that have really made the system a world-class EMS system, even though it might say something different on the side of the ambulance and the employees might be wearing a different uniform.
Thank you for saying that. And it's one of my lecture topics, excuse me, it's one of my lecture topics, as you know, that all those in favor is where it comes down to. And it's certainly come down to that in Fort Worth.
Yeah, and it's, managing the employees' morale, their expectations. The city has done a really good job with hosting town halls and having the fire chief and the city's HR director and the folks that are going to be involved in that process be able to answer questions that our workforce have had. It's going to be a long transition. It's a 12 to 18-month transition, and it's not just, branding and rebranding. It's really infusing the culture of a group of people who are used to doing 7 to 10 calls in 12 hours and used to having things operate with a certain cadence. That's going to be totally different when they start a different type of provider organization, and being able to do that effectively while not losing people, because the people are the most valuable and the city needs them to be working with the fire department, because as we know, staffing is one of the biggest issues. And we've got fire departments in our service area that are not in our service area, but just outside of our service area, who are advertising $10,000 sign-on bonuses and lateral moves and things that 3 years ago, Rob, were unheard of in the fire service. And they're doing that just to recruit people to come work on the ambulance. So the last thing that we or anybody else wants to have happen is for employees to bow out of that transition because they don't feel comfortable with it, because we need every one of those people. And what we've told all of our folks is that the employees who are most secure with this transition are the people on the ambulance and the people in the 911 center and the people supporting the direct operations. People like myself or other folks that are in administration, we can be assimilated out because there may be people in the city that can do those things, and that's fine as long as the people who really matter are taken care of.
Again, thank you for being so candid with me, Matt. I really appreciate that. Classic Rob ending question, of course. Is there anything I've forgotten to ask you or anything you need to tell us before we go?
I think one of the things that we need to continually do as a profession is we need to figure out how to continually communicate our value to elected officials, appointed officials. I'm just right now in a state EMS expo and a big session on data metrics. And you saw in one of the recent conferences that we've got this new presentation on In God We Trust, Everyone Else Bring Data. And it's incumbent on all EMS providers, regardless of your provider type, multi-cross on the side of your truck, Star of Life on the side of your truck, it doesn't matter. You need to continually prove the value of the services that you provide so that people perceive that you are worth investing in. And whether that's in subsidy, other things, we as a profession have not necessarily focused on that in the recent past. It is way past time for us to do that. And it's going to be more important than ever as we look at our future.
Thank you. Again, always wise words from you, my friend. And with that, we'll leave it here. This has been another edition of EMS One-Stop. My returning guest, in fact, I need to give you the byline for most of the stuff I'm doing at the moment, has been Matt Zavadsky, currently of MedStar Fort Worth, shortly to be a national figure in PWW. Matt, thank you very much for joining us. And again, I can't say this enough for leveling with us, and we appreciate that.
Always a pleasure, Ron.
So don't forget, like and subscribe. Catch us on all the social media channels that you're on, whether it's Apple, whether it's Spotify, or indeed watch us over on YouTube. So that's it for this time round. I've been Rob Lawrence. This has been EMS One Stop. He was Matt Zavadsky. And until next time, bye for now.